So these are the two crash bars. The left one here has a bracket assembly welded on, and that's where the side stand goes. And then this is the right one. So after I get the crash bars installed, I'll be able to install the side stand. So this is the hardware that's used to mount the crash bars. And there are 4 U-brackets that go around the frame tubes. And then there's a threaded stud that gets a lock nut and a washer. And then on this end, that's going to go into the end of the crash bar, which is threaded, and it'll use these 4 bolts. So this is the side stand and the mounting hardware, and this is the left side crash bar. Now this pivot pin is going to slide through here, and it's secured on both ends by a couple of snap rings, and it slides through the the side stand like that, and then the side stand will mount in here like this. Now this plate and the 2 springs, the plate mounts on this pin, and then the 2 springs connect to these pins on the side stand. I'll show how that goes together. And then there's a little rubber plug that also fits in here. So I'll install the side stand into the crash bar before I mount it, just to make things a little easier. Now before I insert the pin, I put some wheel bearing grease on it. And the other thing that I did was I put the snap ring on this side. Now the pins here on the side stand are on the same side as this pin. And I'll just slide the pivot rod through and slide it through the hole in the side stand. And then I'll attach the other snap ring on this end to secure the side stand. So this is how the brackets mount. The stud comes through the hole here with the lock nut and the flat washer. And then on the end of the crash bar is a threaded hole which takes the bolt and another flat washer. So that's how it attaches on each end. Now on the bottom of the crash bar is the bracket, and that mounts on the front engine stud. So it'll go on like that. So I am hanging the left side crash bar off the front engine stud, and then I'll rotate it up and I'll install the brackets on the frame tube. So I found if I remove the front engine cover, it was easier to get to this bolt and get it in to the crash bar. And if you remove that cover, always remember to disconnect the ground before you pull it off. Now the lock nut goes on the stud, and then you can see the bracket just goes right around the frame tube. Okay, so the left crash bar is installed, and the right one is installed. And then I torque the front engine mounting stud nuts to 55 foot-pounds. Now the side stand plate mounts on that pin that's on the crash bar bracket, and there's 2 springs. And the way I get them on is I take a long Phillips head and I catch it, put the spring over it, and I catch it behind the pin, and then after I remove the Phillips head, I make sure that the spring is in the little groove on the pin. So the side stand is installed, and of course it will retract, And then I'll put the little rubber boot, the little plug that fits in here, I'll put that in last. So this is the center stand and the mounting hardware. Now there's a bushing that fits in a bracket on the frame, and I'll show you where that is in a minute. But it's got a top hat side, and it slides in so the top hat's on the outside of the center stand, and then this bolt is going to slide through it, and it's secured with a lock nut just like that. Now the other part is the return springs for the center stand, which are these two. Now there's a long leg and a short leg. The short leg will fit in here, and the long leg fits on a pin on the frame, and I'll show you where that is in a minute. I find a brake spring installation tool is a good aid for getting this end of the spring, this end of the spring into these little loops here. And the other thing that I use is a cut down 6mm wrench to tighten up the bolts, because there's not much clearance between the head of the bolt and the engine block. So that's the tools and the parts. Now this is the bracket on the frame, and this is where that bushing will fit. And there's one on each side. Now that's the pin right next to the engine block that the long leg of the spring hooks over. So I have the bike resting on the side stand. So as you can see, the cut-off 6mm works nicely because it doesn't bump into the side of the oil pan. And then I put a socket on here and tighten up the lock nut until everything's secure. Since the return spring is shortest when the center stand is all the way up, I took a piece of wire and wrapped it around to pull the center stand all the way up, so then it'll be easier to install the return spring. Now I installed the long leg of the spring on that pin next to the engine block, and then the short end is going to go on this little loop, and I'll use the brake spring tool to stretch it and get it on there. There we go. It's hooked onto the loop now. So the center stand is installed, and the bike is standing up once more for the first time in a while. So really making progress.